Hi everyone, it's Jill Foster here for Penny Black with my 10th and final video in the series of 10 videos counting down my top 10 favorite stamps, dies, techniques, and design ideas featuring Penny Black's new timeless collection. And I figure for the last video we will go big and we will be featuring some big and some tall blooms. So this video today features three of my favorite creative die sets. These are standalone dies that look beautiful all on their own, and they feature some big and bold abstract blooms, some very tall long stemmed blooms, and some big and bold poppies, as you can see here from these pictures. Now before we begin, I did want to mention that I will have a complete supply list up at the very end of the video on screen, so if you want to check that out in more detail at that time, just hit pause when it pops up and you can look at all of the supplies. The first card we're going to create is this one featuring these very elegant poppies, and this die is called Poppy Edger, and it is so unique the way that this cuts, and you can add this sort of an edge to your card. And I'll also be stamping a sentiment from our transparent set called Sentiments. So I cut a piece of light blue cardstock to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, a standard size card. Then I decided where I wanted that poppy edger to go, and I ran that through my die cutting machine. I felt it really helped to just start with the regular card size first so that I could judge exactly where I wanted that edger to go. Now over on the left hand side, I am stamping this sentiment, which is such a beautiful and unique sentiment. I also die cut that poppy edger from a light tan cardstock and a red cardstock. So this light tan one I'm using just a color with a green Copic marker. You could also cut this from a green cardstock. I just didn't have the right color in my stash. I wanted this sort of a soft muted olive green color. And so that's why I chose to cut it from a light tan and then color it in. Now I'm using a fingertip sponge dauber to sponge on just a little bit darker red ink at the base of these flowers, just to give them a little bit more dimension. It doesn't show as well in the finished photos, but it really does keep this full of life and just not quite as flat as if this didn't have a little bit of inking onto the flowers. And you don't have to worry about going over into the stems because, as you see, we are going to trim these up. So these two red blooms I'm going to trim apart, so that's all we will have. And it's very easy to cut this edge apart because it's just a couple of little snips that you need to make. And then I will do the same thing here with the green. So I want to trim apart anything that is not green. And it's just a couple of snips here and there, and this will be ready to assemble onto the card. So I'm going to pull down now my light blue piece and just add some liquid adhesive first onto the areas where things will be green, so the stems and those little buds. And this card goes so fast when you make this card, but it just has a really elegant feel that almost looks like it took longer. So I'm just gluing down that green stem and those buds, and that's really easy to do because everything's going to match up perfectly because it is a die cut. Sorry about my head there. I was just making sure I could see what I was doing. And then I'm also going to do the same thing here for these flowers. Now you could have this edger go further to the left or further to the right. It's really up to you with where you decide to cut that right at first. And so now that piece is ready to go. Now I'm going to mount this onto a piece of a little bit darker blue cardstock, but I wanted to give this just a little bit more of a airy inked background. So I'm putting blue ink on top of blue paper, which just makes it easier. You don't have to add quite as much color and do quite as much inking. I'm using a sponge dauber ink blending tool starting off of the edge on the edge that will be covered up, as you can see here, and then working my way towards the right hand side, which will show. So it will start to go from darker to light. I'm also die cut a couple of butterflies, and I am inking one of those with the darker blue color. Now I've put foam squares behind the sentiment panel and all of the flower elements, so the flowers and those buds. So that will be popped up onto that panel. And then I will add my butterflies. I'm putting the darker one on the left and the lighter one on the right. I mounted this to a standard size note card, 4¼ by 5½, and added some self-adhesive pearls to those butterflies. And there's a look at the finished card. So we've done some big, bold blooms. Now we're going to do some tall blooms. So here is the next card we will be making. And this card features our creative die set called Tall Flowers. I love the shape of these tall flowers. I just think they have a fun modern feel. And that vase is also very very handy because you could use it with lots of other flower dies that you could put inside of that vase, not just these tall blooms. So for these, I just die cut a whole bunch. I just sat and ran this through the die cutting machine a couple of times. I put the bottom of the stems onto a piece of painter's tape just to kind of hold them still while I colored. And I promised behind my head there, I am coloring those with some Copic markers. I'm not doing any shading or blending, but I am picking just different colors of red, sort of that red coral color. So I have a darker one, a medium, and a light. So I get some interest in my colors without having to do any actual shading on the buds themselves. Now I am using a Copic marker that definitely needs a new nib on it, so I was not too concerned about coloring sort of over that blue taped area at the bottom with that nib. But if you have a brand new beautiful Copic marker with a perfect nib, I would be very careful and maybe only color up to the tape because you will be trimming these down anyways. Now I'm just sponging on a little bit of green ink here, and what this does is it helps get all the sort of sides and corners of the die colored. Sometimes when you color with a marker, there'll be a little bit of white that remains on the side, especially because these were die cut from a heavyweight 110-pound cardstock, and that just helps make sure that's completely covered. For our background, I die cut our cut and stitch circle from white cardstock and layered it onto a light tan. So there's just a little bit of a subtle difference, and I did pop that up using foam squares. I took all of those flowers that I colored and I wrapped them with a piece of regular old Scotch tape. It's not too wide, and I'm just trimming off the bottom. I made sure to get them at different heights and different color variations sort of evenly spread out. And I'm going to cut just some really tiny little pieces of foam tape here just to put behind a few of those flowers. And I'm just deciding here for placement where I want everything to go. You can always go back and add more foam squares if you have a flower that you want to sort of force into a certain area. You can add a foam square and then slide it over or use some liquid adhesive if needed. I also put some glue right behind that taped area. And then my sentiment I stamped, it is from our Grateful Sentiment set. And I stamped one of the smaller versions and then trimmed it apart into 2 strips. I put dimensional adhesive behind them and then use them to cover up that little Scotch taped area on the front of the card. And that completes the tall portion of our big and tall flower video. Here's a closer look at that fun bouquet and the finished card. Now here's a look at the next card that we will be making, and this card features our abstract, let's see here for the name, it's coming up, Abstract Flowers, our Abstract Flowers die set. And to me, these are just the happiest looking flowers, and they're big and bold, and they can be used in so many different ways. For mine, I ran them through individually to get the solid die cut, and then I ran a couple through together at the same time to sort of get a border that could go around the outside edge. And I just sat and cranked through a whole bunch of different ones of these and then went back and sort of mixed and matched my favorite colors together. Now here I wanted to show you a few other design ideas that you can do with these. You could use them sort of down the side of your card for an abstract border. You can also use, I love how that one looks just all by itself. You can layer them up to create just a different look to the flowers. You can add just a couple together. I think that would make a cute little friendship card, or you could pop a little critter peeking out down at the bottom. You could also add some butterflies around. Just changing the orientation of your card, because these are so big and bold, gives them a totally different look. They also come with the stems, and so you've got some variety of stems and some individual leaves that you can cut as well. So you can see here, you could kind of position them off to the left and stamp a sentiment on the right. You could also do sort of an abstract cluster of these. You could use these stems to keep with the abstract look, or use another variety of a stem, like more of a fern or leaf and branch die with them, and you could sort of position them in the corners and put your sentiment in the center. And I recommend with these dies like this, just cut a bunch, assemble a bunch, and then just play like this. Arrange them all the different ways you can think of. You can make lots of different cards, or you could come up with some new favorite ways to use them. Here's where if you just use two smaller ones, what a different look that gives you. So it's really endless, the different ways that you can arrange these and get just different look, but no matter what, they just all look so happy to me. So as you saw, as I was playing around with those, and also here in the future, I am going to layer them onto our Swirly Stitches background. I did do some inking on this, and I'm so sorry I forgot to hit record, but I just layered some painter's tape around the edges and applied inks using a sponge applicator tool and a foam pad, and just started off of the edge and worked my way on. Now I added these flowers to the card, and I sort of did my arrangement, and now carefully I'm going back and just popping in some foam squares behind them, because I found an arrangement that I liked, and I decided if I was going to go big, I would just really go big and put a whole bunch onto the card. So I just filled this up with all of these happy blooms. And I'm just going around and kind of adhering them down. Now, if you find an arrangement you like and you don't want to sort of lose that look, move them and forget how they were, you can also, I do this sometimes, just snap a picture with my phone so I can refer back to that in case things get wiggled around or I have to leave and come back. So once those were down, I just started grabbing some different stems and popping them in, trimming them up, just so that they all lined up along the edge of that inked background. And I'm gluing those flat onto the card. And just continuing to grab those. Again, it's really helpful to just have a lot of them cut and ready to go. It saves you from having to sort of change your mindset while you're working. First you may be designing, but if you have to go back to die cutting, then go back to the designing, sometimes that's frustrating for me. So I like to just have everything ready to go when I'm ready to put the card together. Now this die set also comes with a little center for the flowers, so I decided to use it here. For a variation, you could put sequins in the center, pearls, some enamel dots would look really cute. I just cut this from black cardstock to just add that going across. And then I will mount this panel using some dimensional adhesive. So it's just slightly smaller than the A2 size that I'm mounting it onto, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Now for my sentiment for this, I'm just using a tiny little tag and the exact match die from our lovely birthday transparent set. But man, this tag and the sentiments with it and the fact that it has an exact match die, I find it's really useful. You don't have to just use it with that birthday cake. You can use it with flowers or with the vase. There's so many different places that something like this comes in handy. And because it's not just a rectangular, just a rectangle, it has some charm to it. It can add to, especially a design like this that is pretty much all die cuts and cardstock without a lot of inking or shading to it. Something like this can be just what you need to just add some charm. So here I'm just adding the exact match die, holding in place with some post-it tape. I cut that out and then I popped it up with dimensional adhesive onto the front of the card. Here you can see that fun happy dimension that you get and that swirly stitches die for the border. and the finished card. I hope you enjoyed today's video and that you enjoyed this entire top 10 timeless collection of videos. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website and blog. And I'll link to all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And stay tuned, pretty soon will be those supply lists as I promised. Thanks for watching.